Welcome everybody to this episode of the Women in Technology Spotlight. Today I have with me Jillian Augustine, who is a data scientist at Mondi. She's also a speaker at We Are Developers, Women in Data Science, and also Big Data London. Welcome, Jillian.
Hi. Hey.
So nice to have you with me, Jillian. I would like our listeners, viewers to get to know you a little bit better. Maybe you could tell me a little bit about yourself.
Sure. So my name's Jillian. I'm from the UK. So I've been living in Vienna since 2013. I'm from the UK, and my family's originally from Grenada in the Caribbean. Mm-hmm. So pretty international journey to here. Yeah, I've been working in data science now for since 2018, and it's currently pretty fun.
You have a very international background, as you said. What made you move to Austria?
Sure. So I did my PhD at the Vienna Biocenter. So my PhD was in molecular biology, and the Vienna Biocenter is a really good PhD program. So this was the main reason that I moved to Vienna. I was previously in Canada as well, briefly. So I studied at McGill University for my a part of my undergrad as well. But after being at McGill in Montreal for 1 year, which is great, and it's a great city, I decided this time I would probably stay in Europe because everything's a bit closer together.
I think it's so cool that you say that the program at the Biocenter is such a good one that you actually heard about it in the UK, which I'm a bit stoked about that because I myself have a PhD from the University of Vienna in chemistry, and my major was biochemistry. I did then do my PhD in theoretical chemistry, but still I spent a lot of time there. So I'm glad that the reputation of the institute is still there.
My bachelor's was actually in biochemistry. So I see myself more as a biochemist than a biologist, but it's kind of in the middle.
That's such an interesting coincidence because there aren't actually that many people with a background like ours in IT.
Yeah.
So cool. So this means that you were actually a natural scientist before you became a woman in IT. Tell me a little bit about your educational background. What schools did you go to? Why did you choose this path? What did you find interesting?
Sure. My path is a bit, I would call it a zigzag almost. So if I think back to when I first went to university, 2007, I actually started studying dietetics, which is similar to medical nutrition. And then during this course, there were some biochemistry courses, and I found that I actually liked the biochemistry courses more than the other ones. So my first university was Coventry University in the UK, and then I went to Leeds University to study biochemistry. And then after a couple of years, I had the opportunity to study abroad. So I spent a whole year at McGill University in Canada, which was a great experience and really made me want to stay abroad. And so there I focus mainly on biology, developmental biology, and also a bit of French as well. Why not? And then so I found out about developmental biology when I was there. I really found it interesting. So after I finished my bachelor's degree in Leeds, I decided to start a PhD at the Vienna Biocenter. So I initially started in a group which studied developmental biology because it is such a fascinating field. But then this didn't turn out really to be the best match for me. So then I changed and I decided to go back towards biochemistry. So I started my PhD again just 1 year later. And yeah, that was in a more biochemical focus, looking at the interactions of different proteins in the cell during different conditions. And during that time, I had some introductory courses to R. And when I think about how I got into data science, During my PhD, I must say I watched a lot of really bad presentations. So ones where maybe someone says, oh, you can clearly see this, but the whole audience is completely lost. So I became really, really enthusiastic about doing good data visualizations and telling stories using data in a really good way. So in a really clear way, in an understandable way. And then I think pretty much from there, this was kind of the bridge to data science, because my passion really lies in telling stories with data and learning from data and finding out what data can tell us.
This is wonderful because I feel this deeply. Bad presentations and, information being conveyed in a way that nobody can actually use it is a big problem in science. And I love that you took this approach and that made you look at how to visualize data. I think this is a big thing. Data is not information, I think. It's just data. And what you do with it makes it information. So I understand that this is what fascinates you, making data accessible and turning it into information. So when you became a data scientist, what was your first step after you did your PhD?
Yeah, so I was very fortunate to I applied to the A1 graduate scheme. Mm-hmm. And I was fortunate enough to get a place there. So I became an A1 graduate in AI and data analytics. Mm-hmm. And this fit because throughout my PhD and also before that, I had been doing data analysis on a regular basis. Mm-hmm. So this really, this graduate program really allowed me to gain a better knowledge of business. So what all the different abbreviations mean, what is important for stakeholders, mm-hmm. and to understand how data analytics fits into the wider scheme of a business.
I was not aware that A1 had a graduate program. That's such a cool thing. We have one at VMware too, and I feel that this is such a good way to move into the workplace from education. What kind of data did you work with at A1? Was it more in terms of marketing, or was it more in product development, or what was the background?
So there were two main projects which I worked on. The first one looked at understanding customer satisfaction. So one widely used metric is the Net Promoter Score. So if you ever get a recommendation after you use a service, saying how likely are you to recommend this to somebody else, this is this score. So one main project that I was working on looked at the data from many different customers and tried to understand what are the drivers for someone being likely to recommend the service or not. Mm-hmm. And the second one that I looked at was more not on the customer facing side, although it did have effects naturally for the customers, which was looking at the networks. So trying to predict the outages of different parts of the network and trying to, that was only in the initial stages, but trying to set things up so that conclusions could be made in the future in terms of when is a breakage of a cable likely to happen, where is it likely to happen, and that was all in the context of then allowing the cables to get repaired as soon as possible if you have an idea of where issues might come up.
Okay. That sounds so interesting. Did you also include data from sensors in the network, or did you just take the data of outages and then cable breakages from the historic data?
So in this case, it was just looking at the outages and looking at where they were happening.
When you compare your work with data in the academic space and in A1, was there a difference in the way data was approached?
I think that in the academic space, data is, so in the STEM space at least, mm-hmm. data is way more valued. Mm-hmm. So kind of you work to let the data speak for itself. and what the data says is the truth, and you make decisions based on the data. Okay. Whereas I feel in the corporate space or in the private sector, there are way more influencing factors which come into play, and way more things that you have to take into consideration before you make a decision. So I would say in academia, the decisions are more data driven than in the corporate world.
Yeah, I understand. So I feel that science is more occupied with going where the data leads you, and corporate space might be more, give me the data that I need to do what I want to do.
Yeah. Maybe. Although even in academia, it can be unfortunate, and I think it's kind of a reflection of the circumstances. Sometimes it's known that people can pick and choose the data that they want to support their theories, but generally, I think overall there is a much better appreciation for the value of data inherently.
I want to make a little bit of a step back. So I was wondering if you have a family with a background in STEM. Did they support you? What do you have brothers and sisters maybe who do something similar or not?
So my sister is an optometrist. So this is also science related, and my mom was a dental nurse and then a health service manager, so again in the medical field. So we've always kind of been on this side of on this side of the balance, I would say.
And obviously, since your mother was also in that, she wasn't surprised when you chose the career, because I've talked to other women where the family was surprised by the choice of topic, but I guess that was not the case in your.
I would say because I initially started with dietetics, which is very medical, because I think that was kind of what was known to me. So kind of when you think of the careers that you can go for, anything in a hospital I pretty knew was I pretty much knew was accessible, also because I lived pretty close to the hospital and my mom worked there, so I spent a lot of time just in the offices of the hospital. But I think after dietetics, and then when I switched to biochemistry, I think biochemistry is different because it's not related to a profession. And I do think I was one of the first people I know to do some sort of education which was not specifically related to a profession. So I think my family, and when I think of my family, I think of like extended family, aunts, uncles, godparents, and so they kind of check in to see if I'm okay, if everything's going okay. But I wouldn't say they really know what I'm doing, but they as long as I say I'm okay, then it's fine for them.
You touched on two really different things, and very interesting things here, because one is, you said that was a role that was known to you, nutritionist. And I think that's a very important thing to look at. What kind of roles are available to us as women, or even as men? There's this kind of occupations we know, and then there's all this entire field where we have never met anyone, seen anyone do it. And I think that's a big issue, because we might have talents that are in a completely different field. But I was thinking about this recently because I was writing a short article, and I remembered what Hannibal Lecter said in The Silence of the Lambs. And when he said, how do we begin to covet? We covet what we see. So yeah, and I think this is a big thing, and something I think we might touch on when we look at the education of women, children, what kind of roles we offer to them, what we show them, what they can do. And the other thing is, I'm not sure if it's related to your Caribbean background, but for my family, since I grew up in Africa and my father is from Nigeria, they also had this thing about jobs with educations with clear outcomes, like doctor,
Yeah.
lawyer, you know, those are the things you would do. And I do feel that my father always wondered what biochemistry actually was. And now that I'm in IT, he doesn't really know what I'm doing. So
Yeah,
so
pretty
anyway,
much same.
okay. Yeah, interesting point around being a role model. How did you experience being a woman in IT? Especially since it's also not only a woman in IT, you also went to a strange country, and then how is this for you?
In terms of, like, generally when we think about role models, we are thinking about people who are like us, who have done what we want to do, and then we can kind of follow in their footsteps. In that sense, I don't have anybody who is my role model. I mean, there are many people who I aspire to in various different ways, definitely. And there are many people who I can kind of look up to and think I want to do what they are doing. But it's very intangible still. So I still feel I'm kind of the first one going the steps and seeing what happens.
Mm-hmm. I can imagine. And which gives you the opportunity to be a role model for others who come after you, which is cool also. But it's always more difficult being the first, and I think it takes a certain kind of character to actually do that. A strong one and very centered, because you have to be very clear in what you actually want to achieve, which brings me to my next question. What kind of goals do you have? I mean, you enjoy working with data, obviously, but do you have anything in terms of career path that you have as a goal?
Now I kind of have a rule to myself, which is to create a plan, but don't expect things to go to plan. And I think it's because up until in my bachelor's and even before, when I was at college and school, kind of, if you work hard, then you get good results coming out. And then it's quite easy to have a plan of, I will do this and then do this and do this. But then I think when I had to restart my PhD here, then I realized, like, you can be really good at what you're doing, but sometimes things just don't go to plan. And then this is why now my goal is to keep enjoying what I'm doing, I would say. So my goal at the moment, I've been focusing my efforts on visualization and data analytics in terms of coding and this kind of thing. I've been focusing on this for at least 4 years, and I'm still really enthusiastic about it. So this is kind of my goal. But I know I have a range of skills, so not only on the coding side and going towards the software development side, but also on the communication side, and creating links between businesses and more technical people who maybe cannot express what they want to say so well. So I feel like I have a range of tools on my belt. And at the moment, I'm focusing more on developing my software development skills, because this is where my interest lies right now. But I don't necessarily have an aim. I just want to keep enjoying what I'm doing.
That's cool. And I think that's an important part. I mean, a job like yours means that you have to stay on top of the technology and the developments in the field and all that. And that is easier if you actually enjoy what you're doing. So passion and enthusiasm for what you do is a big thing, I feel, right?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. So in terms of work environment, since this is women in technology, do you have a lot of women you work with, or is it more men? What's it like?
So in our team at the moment, we're split into project managers and then data scientists. And I would say on the project management side, it's strongly women. And I would say on the data scientist side, it's strongly men. So for the first year, no, not first year, for the first 6 months when I was working in my current position, I was the only woman in a data science role. And then my colleague Jelena Milosevic joined, and that was very nice. Even though we don't work together, but it was still nice. And also my boss is a woman as well, which I really appreciate. So I think and she's also a very technical person as well. So even though on a daily basis, I never work with technical women really, it's nice to know that they are there, because I think the diversity in teams like this is important.
I tend to agree, but I would like to ask, why did you feel that it is nice for her to come on board? What difference did you feel?
I think when a team is too homogeneous, then some ways or beings can be a bit exclusive rather than inclusive. So I think the more that there are clearly different groups of people together, the more inclusive it can be. And this also goes in the sense of, in our team, we have some people who are more chatty, and then some people who are more quiet or prefer to work by themselves. And I think, like, if it were 90% chatty, then the quiet person would not feel so included. If it were 90% quiet, then the chatty person would not feel so included. So I think having this diversity really allows each group of people to feel more comfortable.
That is a very good insight. It's not about having someone who is completely like you. It's about having many different people so everyone can be themselves. I think you put it in English. Yeah. And I feel that you're also doing a lot to make the IT more diverse by giving all these talks that, for example, for women are female developers, or what? I'm sorry, I forgot the name of the group, but women in data science and we are developers, sorry, and things like that. What made you start doing these things?
I think during my PhD time, we had this thing called Monday seminar, where once a year you would have to present your results to the rest of the campus. And then this really gave me practice in presenting things and telling stories. And I suppose because I've been in the audience so many times and really just been completely lost. And so it's really important for me that presentations are good and they are understandable. So this is why I also like to do them, because I think it's important that people can understand what's being said. And also, I think sometimes if there is a complicated presentation, sometimes people think, so a person in the audience might think that they are too stupid to understand what the topic is, and it's not the case at all. It is a responsibility of the person presenting to make sure that their message is clear. And I think I have presented in the past when you see people, it's really nice to see when people get it. Whilst you're presenting, they understand what you're talking about. And then I also get good feedback afterwards, because people say that they really liked how I did this thing, or I made it understandable, and they never realized that two things were linked in the way that I explained them. And I think getting good feedback from people is kind of always a good motivation to continue.
I love how you talked about that it's the responsibility of the presenter to make people understand what you're talking about. And I also feel it's so important, because what you have observed, I've also seen, people obviously don't know what you're talking about, but they don't ask, because the problem is aggravated because nobody seems to really understands, but nobody wants to be the first to ask a question. So you have these bad presentations and you have the audience that just sits there and stares at you. And yeah, this is something we definitely need to address. And I think what you do also helps people feel more comfortable with actually being in that field, because they, this moment where you understand something is the moment where you feel you can do it too, So yeah, thank you for looking at this issue. So you had a kind of uncommon path into IT, being a natural scientist and then moving into IT. But if you were a young woman and you were starting out now to get on this career journey, what would you have wanted to know at the beginning, or what recommendations would you give to a young woman starting out, or a girl in school?
This is interesting. So one thing, you mentioned a girl in school, and that reminds me of kind of a reason I think my path was a bit like not direct and zigzagged, because in the UK you study 11 subjects up until the age of 16, and then you only study 4 from 16 to 18. Mm-hmm. And then at university you generally just study 1. And what's more, the 11 subjects that you choose to finish when you are 16, you choose them when you're 13. So there is really, really narrow in terms of what you can study. Because yeah, pretty much if you don't choose to study geography when you are 13 years old, you cannot study it at university, which is crazy because you're 13 years old. How do you know? Mm-hmm. So one interesting thing when I was thinking about what I chose to study is that when I was 13, I chose to study French, and then when I was 16, I chose to continue studying French, and then actually I ended up in Montreal, where my French got really good, and then it was the first time I was actually in France, which was after I was in Montreal, because I'd never been to France before. But I just think, and I just say that because I studied French because I liked it. Mm-hmm. Not because I was the best at it, but because I liked it. And that kind of led me to Montreal, and then kind of led me where I am now. So I really think you should study what you want to study. Mm-hmm. You study, it's not always about studying what you are the best at, but study what is fun. Mm-hmm. I think that's really important. Yeah, and I think I was very fortunate looking back, because I didn't have anybody who directly told me to my face that I couldn't do something. Yeah. And that doesn't mean that representation isn't important, because I never aspired to be many things because I just didn't know they existed. But I was very fortunate that I didn't have people around me who were too insecure in themselves and then decided to try and limit my possibilities because of this. But I think now in the digital age, so that there is so many more resources on the internet and so many websites you can read where people create blogs and stuff like this, I would definitely give the advice to a younger person that if you want to do something, you can look into it. You can find the people online, you can find the websites online to learn different things and to learn different tips. And I think that's definitely the way to go, is to do what is fun and do what you want.
Yeah. Very true. Thank you. You touched on one very specific thing in the beginning, which I also find detrimental to young people, is limiting, their exposure to certain topics and information. So I feel one thing we should look at, and that's obviously not ours thing to do, but definitely the education system should be as broad as possible. So everybody gets a chance to dabble in different topics and look at them, because obviously 13 years is much too young to actually decide whether you will like something in the future or not.
I actually, when I was 13, I chose German.
Mhm.
I think I chose French. No, when I was 12, I could choose between German and Spanish, and I chose German because then I got to visit Germany. And then when I was 13, I decided to go for French. But now I'm fluent in both, so it worked its way out.
Yeah, luckily.
Yeah,
But you never know, right? Where life will take you, if it will be German
exactly.
or French or something completely different that will be useful, you know. And then the second thing that makes me thoughtful is that you said you were lucky because nobody discouraged you from doing what you're doing. And the same is true for me. And that is probably the reason why I was able to go the path I did. But that's a sad thing, actually, you know, that you have to be happy that at least nobody said, don't do it, you're not good enough.
Yeah.
When don't have the role models, and you don't have the, you know, the lift that you might need to go higher places. I think that's something we can do for others, you know, telling them that they are definitely good, you know, good enough to choose a career in IT or in science, and they will make it. So that's something I feel we should all try to do. And thank you for coming on my interview. Thank you for taking the time. It was lovely chatting with you. Thank you and goodbye.
Thank you. Bye.